What's going on, y'all? It's the kid FortWorthFabian, BigBossFabo. I'm back with the reaction video for you guys today, and I'm actually doing a Beatles reaction, man. I'm doing a full documentary reaction to Parting Ways, which I've actually tried to attempt to do before. You know what I'm saying? But Parting Ways, an unauthorized story on life after the Beatles, examines the phenomenon that was Beatlemania, but also looks at the ups and downs of the Fab Four since their heyday, from John Lennon's relationship with Yoko Ono to his untimely death, from Paul McCartney's solo career to his knighthood, from George Harrison's stabbing to death from cancer and Ringo Starr's rise above being just a drummer. Parting Ways treats the Beatles with the respect they deserve and details their lives since the world's #1 band fell apart. Wow, what a little excerpt. But with that being said, man, I've tried to attempt to do this documentary before, and I tried to do it on live stream, and it got blocked. So this is me trying a second attempt at doing it. I probably got through like the first 8 minutes, and I'm gonna go back, obviously starting from the top, so I can watch it and enjoy it with you guys. So like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, FortWorthFabian. It's the road to 1 million subscribers. Peace, love, prosperity to everybody rocking with the channel. Let me know content you guys want to see, man. Comment down below. Beatles content's tough, so hopefully, this one airs for you guys. So let's hop into this reaction, man. Parting Ways, gang.
Four decades after they parted ways, the Beatles still hold the top spot on every conceivable list of the greatest recording artists of all time. Not only do they beat all comers in the realms of critical and commercial success, no other pop act before or since has even come close to matching the Fab Four in terms of innovation and social impact. With pop music still in its infancy back in the early 60s, the lads from Liverpool broke so much musical, lyrical, stylistic and cultural ground that by the time they split in 1970, they'd left little new territory for successive generations of musicians to explore. As well as through their own catalogue of recordings, which continue to attract new fans every year.
Beatles, man, the influence is huge. If you don't understand it, basically you're living under a rock. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny how many bands will mention that they're influenced by the Beatles. I've reacted to countless bands on this channel that mention the Beatles. They're like basically the blueprint. So legendary status, you know what I mean, down in the books. And I've never really thoroughly went through the story. So this is more so, I guess, towards the end of the band, and it's still gonna be good information, in my opinion. But yeah, if you got other additional documentaries that you know of, more like top from bottom type of story, put them in the comment section below and let me know some of those in the comments.
The Beatles have lived on through the legacy of their unmistakable influence on music ever since. There could be no doubt, however, that in creating such a hard act to follow, John, Paul, George and Ringo were also making a rod for their own backs, condemning themselves to a lifetime of comparison to their days as a Beatle. Whatever they chose to turn their hand to, their subsequent achievements would forever be judged against the unmatchable benchmark they'd set as a group. This is the story of what happened next. Often referred to as the first Beatle, John Lennon, along with his wife Yoko Ono, has often been blamed for the breakup of the supergroup. The story goes that after meeting Yoko at one of her exhibitions in 1966, John became more and more infatuated with the Japanese-American conceptual artist. They began an affair in 1968, bringing about John's divorce from his first wife, Cynthia. From then on, he and Yoko were joined at the hip, frequently appearing in interviews together, like this one, in which they extolled the virtues of a form of expression known as howling.
Communicate with you, and there you don't intellectualize communication, you just howl,
But how does a howl?
That's an expression that's not so intellectualized as words, It's just like
Pure sound. Pure sound.
Well, anything. Ah, that's howling.
You know, something like that.
Not
These guys were on a purely different type of thinking plane, bro. Yoko Ono and John Lennon, they was on a whole different type of just thought process. You know what I mean? Would you attribute it to the hippie era, or people mention that, like, you know, there's a lot of stoners, drugs was heavy. Of course, we know the Beatles partook. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure that affected thought process, or, you know, attributed to thought process. And John Lennon was just a free thinker, open thinker, and a lot of his thoughts were a little bit too progressive, you know, especially for that time. I feel like in this time, he'd be heavily needed, you know, just in terms of peace and what he preached, you know. But yeah, this is about the area in which I got to when I originally did this video.
Not only did they record their own avant-garde music together, John also insisted that Yoko be allowed artistic input into the Beatles recordings,
For what?
widening the cracks that had already begun to appear within the band.
What about another word?
In 1969, John and Yoko formed the Plastic Ono Band, which included Eric Clapton on lead guitar. The rapturous reception they received at that year's Toronto Rock and Roll Revival, and the success of their anti-war anthem, Give Peace a Chance, which was written during John and Yoko's famous bed-in honeymoon, consolidated John's decision to leave the Beatles. Despite subsequent renegotiations of a new contract, it was all over bar the shouting, and John was already well on his way to a successful solo career. The following year, he explored the pain of losing his mother and splitting from the Beatles in John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, which featured the song Working Class Hero, complete with the famous expletive that saw it banned from BBC Radio. The change in artistic direction came with a new haircut, which saw him casting off his famous flowing locks.
He had to rebrand himself. He had to revitalize the career, the image, you know what I mean? But crazy story I always tell about Yoko Ono. I got to mention this real quick because, you know, I had actually been very avid into creativity, you know, writing poetry back in the day. And I had a Twitter page that I would leave a lot of these quotes, phrases on. I think I was doing partial music, etc. I don't really know, but I had like 16,000 followers on this Twitter page, like early 2000s era. You know what I'm saying? And Yoko Ono had followed me on Twitter. Me and her had like an exchange in the words. I think she had like retweeted something I posted. I had said something back to her, and she kind of gave me some words of encouragement or something like that. But it was such a big thing to me because it's like back then I had no familiarization with the Beatles, or, you know, so I did my research at that point in time. I'm like, okay, you know the name Yoko Ono, but you know, her name speaks louder than probably a lot of other things. So it's kind of like that's when I did a little bit of digging and found out the association. But it was kind of humbling in a sense, you know what I'm saying? But I ended up, that page ended up getting hacked, all types of stuff. Crazy kind of story.
And sporting a short back and sides.
We just got cheesed off with it, you know. It was getting in the ears. It's just the same way I grew it, you know. I just felt like having it. Now I feel like having it short.
It's for the new year.
We wanted a new year ahead, you know.
I don't want to sound unkind, but don't you think that this may have been construed as just another Lennon stunt?
Well, we tried to keep it quiet. I don't care. It came useful for this, you know. Yeah, more stunts the better. But when we cut it, we didn't think of that. We were just cutting it in private in the farmhouse. And I asked the chick that cut it to be quiet. And she lasted 3 days before she broke the news. Because I could have driven around Europe, you see, in disguise. Nobody would have known. But she just couldn't keep her mouth shut.
Being granted the luxury of anonymity was just one of the hopes John Lennon held for the future. In the title track of his 1971 album, Imagine, he listed many more. Written as a plea for world peace, the song would quickly go on to become his signature tune and remains by far the most popular of all his solo works. The album, which he co-produced with Phil Spector and Yoko, also included Jealous Guy and the song How Do You Sleep, which pulled no punches in its unveiled...
Now tell me y'all's thoughts on, I guess, like the musical incline, or like how musically inclined Yoko Ono was. A lot of people that critique of her, that's the critique, that like Lennon was trying to include her on concepts and stuff, and it's like, bro, what is you doing? She don't even, you know what I'm saying? It's like she's not even on the same type of level. But talking about working with Phil Spector and they produced the whole album together, let me know y'all's thoughts on that project. Did y'all like, I guess, the songs they came up with? Could y'all see like her musical talent or no? Or is that story just all cap?
Attacks on his former songwriting partner, Paul McCartney. Over the next few years, he and Yoko collaborated on more anti-war songs, like Happy Christmas, War is Over. Their 1972 album, Sometime in New York City, focused its attentions on race relations and women's rights. It kicked off with a song called Woman is the Nigger of the World, which, like Working Class Hero, was banned from radio airplay. And much to his reluctance, John was being hailed as the leader of a social revolution. In between releasing his own singles and albums and his work with Yoko, John collaborated with a host of other artists. As well as writing songs for Ringo Starr, he produced Mick Jagger's song Too Many Cooks Spoil the Soup and co-wrote David Bowie's first US #1 single, Fame. He also scored his own US #1 with Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which featured Elton John on backing vocals.
Had to grab a charger real quick. Computer about to die.
And piano. But while things were ticking away nicely on the professional front, John's home life was far from settled. The relationship with Yoko had become very strained in the wake of their 1968 arrest for possession of cannabis resin, with John facing almost certain deportation from the United States. He began drinking heavily, while Yoko became more and more focused on her work. In 1973, Yoko decided they should separate for a while and suggested John take up with their personal assistant, May Pang. He and May ended up living together in LA for an 18-month period that John subsequently referred to as his lost weekend. Long believed
his long getaway to, a rendezvous, so to speak.
To be a bleak period in John's life, involving booze-filled recording sessions and altercations with other musicians, May contends they shared plenty of happy times together and recently decided to release a collection of photographs in an exhibition called Time Remembered.
I wonder how much she collected off this little exhibition she participated in, man. Come on, dog. Like, exploitation or not? Let me know y'all's thoughts on that in the comment section below. A lot of people say she was just milking it.
People think he was a very depressed, very down and out and drunk all the time. And I started thinking a myth has to be broken about that time period. And I thought it's also for him.
During his time out from Yoko, John took the opportunity to get reacquainted with his son Julian from his first marriage to Cynthia and made up with Paul McCartney. For May, narrowing down photos of their time together proved a big challenge.
I only chose 9 because that was John's number more than 9. I just want to keep that going. I think we got a good selection.
By 1975, it was out with May Pang and back in with Yoko Ono. In October, Yoko gave birth to their son Sean, and John became a virtual recluse, retiring from music and playing stay-at-home father to Sean at the Dakota in New York. Away from the...
So they had caught a cannabis charge, right? Him and Yoko Ono, and you telling me during that point in time when he was kind of in hot water in terms of like deportation, that never happened? I guess money can make anything go hush-hush, huh? If he's chilling out in New York, look like he got to stay.
In the recording studio, he indulged himself in another of his many creative talents, drawing. Long before becoming a musical legend, John had studied art in his native Liverpool, and he continued to draw throughout his career with the Beatles, adopting a more sparse style of line drawing.
He did his first collection as a wedding gift for Yoko Ono when they got married. And that went on exhibition in London just after the wedding. And that was raided by the police for obscenity. So that was the end.
Gallery owner Judith Nitkin was particularly struck by the artist's whimsical humour.
I don't think it's possible to separate the man from the art. The art is great lines, and I think...
Copyright.
5 years of silence.
Y'all wonder why I'm fast forwarding through the interview parts or the interview excerpts is because copyright be associated. I be getting flagged for them, so I'm trying to fast forward through them. So obviously, YouTube ain't picking up on that.
John finally headed back into the studio with Yoko. Legend has it that he'd been happy to sit back as long as Paul McCartney was producing, as he put it, garbage. But upon hearing Paul's single Coming Up, he confessed he couldn't get the song out of his head and felt compelled to get back to work. The resulting 1980 album was billed as his comeback. Double Fantasy showed his softer, more mature side and was packed with odes to his family, such as Beautiful Boy, Woman, and Just Like Starting Over. In interviews to promote the album, John declared he was happier now than at any other point in his life, and he wrote a song called Life Begins at 40 to prove it.
Real quick, I didn't realize him and McCartney had such a competitive nature going back and forth at each other when they hit their solo points. But I want to know what's y'all's opinion on each one of their solo careers. Who was kind of at the height of it? Was McCartney kind of like I think McCartney had more like consistent music, right? But let me know y'all's thoughts in the comments on John's solo content.
Tragically for John Lennon, life was also destined to end at 40. Just 3 weeks after the release of Double Fantasy, he was gunned down on the way into his apartment building. On December the 8th at 10:50 p.m, he was following Yoko into the Dakota when 25-year-old Mark Chapman stepped out of the shadows and fired 5 shots. 4 found their mark, and at 11:21, John Lennon was pronounced dead on arrival at the Roosevelt Hospital. Just 6 hours earlier, he had unwittingly handed his murderer an autographed copy of Double Fantasy on his way out to the recording studio.
Dickhead.
As soon as news broke of the tragedy,
Disrespect. He had just autographed something for you, and you went and murked him.
the world united with Yoko in shock and grief and flocked to the scene of his murder. The following day, she issued a statement explaining that there would be no funeral, saying John loved and prayed for the human race. Please do the same for him. Love, Yoko and Sean. Vigils took place around the world the following Sunday, the largest of which saw some 100,000 mourners observing a 10-minute silence in New York's Central Park. Every year since then, fans have been gathering outside the imagined circle at Strawberry Fields in Central Park to pay tribute to their hero and his message of peace. Mark Chapman was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. He since applied for parole 5 times, claiming to be over his delusions.
Ha!
So far, however, his appeals have been denied by the parole board, perhaps as much for his own protection as for that of the general public.
I think for Mr. Chapman's own safety, it might be a good idea for him to stay, in prison, because there's a lot of people who are more of Lennon fans than we are that could take that to extremes, and his life could be in danger.
I think that he really needs to actually stay in there. Let him suffer. Let him suffer the way and let him feel the hurt that everyone else felt when John Lennon was killed.
Meanwhile, Yoko has remained true to the message of peace and love she and John epitomized with their bed-ins 40 years ago. Having forgiven Mark Chapman for murdering her soulmate, she recently reflected upon what John would have thought of the world today.
Well, he would have been very upset that it's suddenly a very violent world again. He was a peacenik, But I think that he would have been excited about the internet, website, all that.
John Lennon on social media would have been like a force to be reckoned with. You know, all the peace quotes and like uplifting content he would probably deliver from his social media platforms. Buddy would probably be like a whole peace guru. He probably one of them that would change a lot of different things, bro. You know, he was so far advanced just in terms of how he thought, how how he wanted to change things and how he promoted, just peace, equality. You know, he was a very spiritual individual, 1,000%. Buddy was on it. Real revolutionary type stuff. So, and it's stuff that make people question him a lot. It's not the normal type of thought process, theories, etc. that a normal person thinks. He had ideas and thoughts that made people kind of scratch their head, like, what he's smoking. But really, that's my point by saying his thoughts were so far ahead. Like, he wasn't living in today or his present time.
And as fans gathered to mark the 25th anniversary of his death in New York, she was cheered by the obvious immortality of his widespread influence.
I think the whole world, not just the musicians, are totally influenced by his thoughts, his music, and good for the world. Actually, it's great. Yeah.
On a personal level, however, there's no doubt that she still misses him terribly.
Would have been loving. It's just that when I hear "Growth with Me," that's the one that chokes me up because. Well, he was saying "Growth with me" to me, and well, now he's saying to everybody, I suppose, so to the world, so that's good.
Mm.
After waking to the news of John Lennon's death on the morning of December 9th, 1980, Paul McCartney holed himself up in an Oxford Street studio in London and spent the day listening to music. When he emerged later that evening, he was swamped by reporters clamouring for his reaction to John's death. Clearly drained and uncomfortable with all the attention, he replied that he was shocked at the terrible news and added the comment, "It's a drag, isn't it?" which instantly earned him a pasting in the press. Paul later confessed that he regretted the remark, claiming that he had intended no disrespect, but that he had been at a loss for words.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, bro. Of course, the media gonna take it as insensitive, but obviously, what's one to think when you've lost a loved one at that point in time? Of course, you're gonna keep it moving, like, especially when you a celebrity like that. Everywhere you step out, people, TMZ, all the paparazzi, they in your face, flashing the cameras, asking you questions, getting it on camera, video, whatever, and they ask you, so if they had asked you, what do you think about the death, and if you in such a place, such a mindset to where, a lot of words probably aren't even coming to mind. You probably ain't really want to talk about it. You just trying to get from where you're going into the vehicle to get out of that space away from the paparazzi. And they ask you a question, and of course, maybe you're a person that just feels, it's appropriate to at least respond, or it's decent to at least respond, but maybe you're just not using the right word. You know what I'm saying? So they're going to take that word, whatever you use, manipulate it, put it on the headlines, the front page of the newspaper, say, oh, he said this and this about that, and just try to drag you. That's the media, bro. I think it's best to just stay quiet, probably. But even if you stay quiet, they're going to say the next headline is going to be, oh, such and such, no response, insensitive to the death of John Lennon. You know what I'm saying? They're going to run with the narrative like that. So the media you can't take it serious.
The tragic passing of his former songwriting partner had temporarily silenced an artist who was on his way to becoming the most successful musician and composer in popular music history. With more number ones over the course of his 45-year career than any other artist. Just 1 year earlier, the Guinness Book of Records had honoured his achievements with the presentation of a rhodium disc. But
I guess to answer my question earlier about who was more popular, huh? Buddy he was on fire.
Even then, he'd seemed ill at ease with members of the press.
The award covers a period of 16 years, something like that. Would you briefly just sort of go through those 16 years and tell me a few of the highlights for you?
No.
I mean, we've all got our own personal memories.
16 years you want me to go through?
No, just pick out one or two of the highlights, Paul.
Of the highlights of my career?
The things that
As we see it
the things
today.
that stand out in your own mind.
Meeting Jimmy Savile in the back of a van and hearing about his army exploits. That was a big one. Meeting the Queen. Come on, be sensible now.
That's right.
He said, "Be sensible now." See, it's funny because like some of these, bruh, that's how irked these artists get with reporters, the media, to where like even when they have to sit down with for an interview, they're not that decent. Like you could tell he ain't even really with it, but it's not that big of a question. It's not that difficult of a question. I would keep a vague answer if I wasn't that, pleased to be sitting in the interview. I'll just say like he kind of doing it, but it's taking him a bit. But that's the thing. Some of these artists get to a point to where they think every question coming from a reporter or the media is a dumb question, or you sound stupid, or why is you asking me that? I'm not even gonna answer that. Oh, quit wasting my time. They walk out of interviews, like all type of stuff, bro.
16 years, I don't know, going to America the first time, getting a #1 in America, going on our last tour with Wings to America and playing Seattle Kingdom from about 67,000 people, couldn't see one of them. And meeting you has been basically the high spot of the whole 16 years, actually.
This guy.
When we look at your...
Perhaps his reluctance to hobnob with the media could be traced back to his much publicised split from the Beatles. Although John, George and Ringo all voiced their intentions to quit the band over the course of the late 60s, it was Paul who officially banged the nail in the coffin by announcing their breakup on April 10, 1970, just 1 week ahead of the release of his first solo album, McCartney. He was also the driving force behind the legal dissolution of the Beatles partnership. As the reason for his departure, Paul cited personal differences, business differences, and musical differences, but most of all, he claimed, because he had a better time with his family. Press manager Derek Taylor was immediately put on the spot.
Now, does this mean a business or emotional split within the Beatles?
Excuse me, sir. What happened with the Beatles? Tell us what happened? They just don't get along anymore. Buddy, he ain't got no answers, man. Funny how they try to get somebody else to answer questions that only members of the band can really answer. What happened between you guys? Tell us how Paul felt. I think he felt, shut your,
I should think a bit of both. But I think it's more of a break. He answers himself that he doesn't know whether it's temporary or permanent. That's the truth. I think none of us know that.
Aside from the personal and creative rifts that had been opening up within the band, one of Paul's biggest bones of contention was the appointment of Alan Klein as business manager of the band's record company, Apple.
Alan Klein's name is mentioned, and Alan Klein is definitely disowned in this question and answer by Paul, because he doesn't like Alan Klein. Why doesn't he like him? I don't know, but he doesn't.
Apparently, Paul had never trusted the abrasive New Yorker, despite the fact that Klein had renegotiated the Beatles' contract with EMI, handing them the highest royalties ever granted to an artist at the time. Meanwhile, the tough-talking Klein wasn't flinching.
What do you feel about the fact that Paul apparently is definitely dissociating himself from you? It appears that he's antipathetic to you.
Well, it's never pleasant when someone appears not to like you. I think his reasons are sick. I think they're his own personal problems. But unfortunately, he is obligated into Apple for a considerable number of years, so his disassociating himself with me has really no effect.
But rather than allow Klein to milk the Beatles and diminish their artistic legacy, Paul acted to legally dissolve the band's partnership the following year. On his visits to the courthouse, he was accompanied by his American wife of 2 years, Linda, whom he credited with giving him the strength to work again after the Beatles' breakup. They'd met in 1967 when Linda was on assignment to photograph swinging 60s music.
I honestly wonder if they're going to touch on everybody's piece of the story after they part ways, because obviously we touch on John, we know now it's Paul's turn, but like...
musicians in London. Paul was immediately impressed with her talent as a photographer. By the time the Beatles split up, Paul and Linda had already had one child together, called Mary. Paul had also adopted Linda's daughter, Heather, from her first marriage. While John was collaborating with Yoko over in New York, Paul invited input from Linda on his second solo effort, Ram, which reached #1 in the UK and #2 in the US. In 1971, the husband and wife team were joined by guitarist Denny Laine and drummer Denny Sewell, who completed the lineup of the new band Wings. Although Linda often drew derision for her weak vocals and awkward stage presence, Wings would go on to enjoy a great deal of critical and
well, she had weak vocals.
Commercial success over the next 10 years. As well as reuniting with Beatles producer George Martin to record the theme song to the 1973 James Bond film Live and Let Die, they won 2 Grammy Awards the same year for their album Band on the Run. Other hits included Mull of Kintyre, Silly Love Songs, and With a Little Luck. After John died in 1980, Paul was nervous about touring and ended up disbanding Wings the following year, but that didn't slow his musical output. On his second solo album, McCartney 2, which featured the lead single Coming Up, he played every single instrument, and throughout the decade, he would collaborate with a host of other artists, including the hit single The Girl Is Mine with Michael Jackson and Ebony and Ivory with Stevie Wonder. He also struck up a songwriting partnership with Elvis Costello, which spawned Elvis's hit Veronica.
So obviously Paul McCartney had a thorough run of music, bro, but I'm so like uninformed and educated on his catalog, his albums, his singles. Like, I do not know nothing about Paul McCartney's solo run, bro, but of course it's legendary. So let me know in the comment section below if there's songs I should be reacting to, look into, and hopefully. The thing about Beatles reactions, bro, they be getting blocked, copyright associated is so tough to try to get through. It's just, sometimes it's not worth dealing with. That's why I'm just hoping this video can air. Or, they don't block it or take it down. But if you have recommendations for Paul McCartney content, put it in the comment section below.
Like John and Yoko, Paul and Linda also faced legal challenges over their use of drugs. During the 70s, police had found marijuana growing on his farm in Scotland, and in 1980, Paul was arrested in Japan for carrying 7.5 ounces of cannabis in his luggage.
Boy, smoking that dope smoke.
4 years later, they were busted once again in Barbados. Towards the end of the decade, it was time to get back out on the road with his new band lineup to promote his latest album, Flower.
It's funny, like all the, I guess, or like all the hits he got were just slaps on the wrist, right? Because he ain't facing no time. He got caught with how many pounds? Or did they say ounces? I'm tripping, boy. Shit, boy, the real Rasta man, the boy the smoker man.
Once you've got a band going, you start to feel like going on tour. You think, well, let's get out of this room and go to another room. So it's really that. We've got a nice band that we enjoy playing with each other.
Beatles had broken up. He was still being asked about a possible reunion.
Obviously, the Beatles can't get back together now because John died. And to me, that was the ultimate thing. You know, even though people have suggested that the three of us work with Julian, I don't think you can replace John. He's just such a key factor, you know, it's impossible.
That was a dumb question, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you.
And I wouldn't even want to try that. But as far as maybe me, Ringo, and George...
I mean, I ain't gonna say it's a dumb question, but yeah, like, you make a good point. How you gonna have a Beatles reunion without John? I feel like he's such a vital factor of the band that it's like, all right. But then it's like, okay, you could still have, you know, a reunion with, George, Ringo, obviously Paul, you know what I'm saying? But It's I just don't think it would be the same. Let me know what y'all think on that in the comment section below. Would it be the same or not? Yeah.
Working together again in some form, maybe playing together or making some songs together. That'd be the first move.
In fact, the first move was teaming up with George and Ringo in the 1990s to put together Apple's The Beatles Anthology documentary series, which included 3 double albums of previously unreleased material and a 10-hour video box set. Sadly, however, the late 90s were marred by Linda's battle with breast cancer. Through her profile as an animal rights activist and author of vegetarian cookbooks, Linda had become a national icon in her own right, and Britain joined Paul and their children Heather, Mary, Stella and James in mourning her loss in April 1998. The same British public were left reeling less than 2 years later when Paul, or rather Sir Paul, was spotted squiring former model Heather Mills to several public events. Clearly besotted with the anti-landmine campaigner, he ignored the public outcry and pressed ahead with the courtship, much to the well-publicised disgust of his designer daughter Stella, who was just 3 years younger than Heather. Sir Paul and Heather were married in front of 300 guests in a lavish ceremony at Castle Leslie in Scotland, and in 2003 they had a daughter called Beatrice Millie. Heather set about convincing Paul's friends and fans that she was a worthy successor to St. Linda. Not only did she step up her involvement in anti-landmine campaigns, she took up Linda's mantle as an animal rights activist, becoming a vocal supporter of the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. But all her hard work fell on fallow ground, with Paul's nearest and dearest refusing to relinquish their mistrust of the glamorous amputee. The media were relentless in their determination to dig up details of her murky past, spreading rumours that she had formerly worked as a...
The media once again, see, I'm telling you guys, boy. Oh man, they gonna get... You got a new love life, you got a new person just around you in your camp, they gonna dissect them. Who is that? What's their past like? You would think they was the feds.
High-class prostitute. And in 2005, they hit pay dirt. Branding her Lady Mucker, a British tabloid published semi-pornographic photos taken of her for the 1988 book The Joys of Love. Humiliated and embarrassed by the stories, Sir Paul initially defended his wife, but in May 2006, it was announced that they were separating, and the mudslinging began in earnest. Heather opened her account by accusing Sir Paul of regularly physically abusing her while under the influence of drink and drugs. While Paul kept quiet, his friends and supporters were vitriolic in response.
She is trying to desperately destroy a legend. She's destroying a national treasure. I don't know what she's playing at. I think she's a very, very wicked sado who needs an awful lot of help.
A sado that stood to win up to a quarter of Paul's estimated £800 million fortune after just 4 years of marriage. In the end,
£800 million, y'all. Just kind of think about that a little bit. That's stupid money. He 200 million pounds from being a billion.
However, she had to settle for a lump sum of £24.5 million, along with £8 million worth of assets, plus £35,000 a year in child support. But even while he was riding out what became known as the split of the decade, Paul never stopped working. While off on a 2-year world tour, during which he headlined Glastonbury Festival, he wrote a behind-the-scenes book called Paul McCartney On Stage, Off Stage and Backstage. He also completed his third classical work.
Paul McCartney's such a G, bro. He been through it all. He done it all. He was like, he just cool. Like, if you want to be cool, be like Paul McCartney, bro. Just, follow his footsteps.
Hey, Colmeum. 8 years in the making. It premiered at the Royal Albert Hall in November of 2006. Already separated from Heather at this stage, he was free to talk about the real inspiration behind the work.
it was started when Linda was alive, and we originally went up to Magdalen together. So it has a lot of my feelings for her in it. When she died, it stalled me, and it took a year or so before I could get back into it. And the interlude in the middle, the particularly sad melody, is what got me going again. So her spirit is very much in this. It would have been her birthday yesterday, so very appropriate.
There was also the 2005 album Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, and 2007's Memory Almost Full.
Phrase, Memory Almost Full, because it seems symbolic of our life today. I think, the life moves so fast, and not just for me, for many people. Your messages are always full, and your mind's full. It doesn't matter if you're my age or 20 to delete my messages. I think you need to delete facts now just to clear your mind. So that really to do with my memory.
And on the promotional trail of his 22nd solo album, he proved he could still pull in the screaming fans.
Yeah, these are two happiness. I love Paul McCartney. I can't believe I'm
Boy, he was popping when you were still a fetus. The what? You don't know who he is?
At the age of 65, that was good enough for Paul to put off any thoughts of retiring. Since then, he's picked up an Ultimate Legend Award from MTV, performed his first ever concert in Israel, and signed up with Starbucks label Hear Music. And despite the disastrous end to his second marriage, neither has he given up on love. Even before his divorce from Heather became final, he'd begun dating trucking heiress Nancy Chevelle, proving that there's still plenty of life in the old Beatle.
If for a young playboy, though, come on, bro. He ain't gonna be single for too long. He's knocking him out the park. But Paul McCartney, a young playboy, like, come on, dog.
Yet.
I'll do it as long as they like it and I like it.
Despite his incredible gifts as a musician-songwriter, George Harrison was destined to remain eternally overshadowed by fellow Beatles John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Maybe this was due to him being the most junior member of the group, or perhaps it had more to do with his famously shy nature, which earned him the nickname the Quiet Beatle. Towards the end of the 60s, however, George's songwriting talents were garnering more and more recognition. His song Something was covered by Frank Sinatra, who declared it one of the greatest songs of the last 20 years. Despite this, Paul's gripes about his guitar playing were wearing him down, and George walked out twice. On top of that, he had to contend with being arrested and charged for marijuana possession.
All these fools was being dope boys, man. You hear me? All these fools was dope slanging. All of these dudes, each single one of them got hella marijuana charges, bro.
His wife Patty were found guilty and fined £250 each.
I thought they found 250 pounds of marijuana.
1970, George was quoted as saying, "The biggest break in my career was getting into the Beatles in 1962. The second biggest break since then is getting out of them." By then, he'd amassed a backlog of his own material, and he was first out of the blocks with his solo effort, All Things Must Pass. The sheer volume of material on the triple album confirmed the feelings of many fans that his songs had been stifled by the Beatles. All Things Must Pass was a massive hit, but one of the most famous songs of the album, My Sweet Lord, got him into legal trouble because of its similarity to the 1963 Chiffons hit, He's So Fine. He was sued for copyright infringement. George denied deliberately stealing the song, but he ended up losing the case in 1976. The battle over damages dragged on until the 1990s. Meanwhile, he remained steeped in the Indian culture and Hinduism he'd embraced in the late 60s. As well as studying meditation with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, along with the rest of the band, he developed a close friendship with sitar player Ravi Shankar.
These dudes were so philosophical, man. When I tell you, like the line of John Lennon, the mind of Harrison, man, I'm telling you, like a lot of the, I watched some of the what's it called? You know, like some of the interviews from him, you know, and they're just deep. Like he's dropping knowledge. He's very eclectic. You know what I'm saying, man? He got some good information. And in some of those interviews, people are looking at him like he's delusional. Once again, progressive thoughts. People in modern times can't comprehend. They can't even digest some of the stuff you be talking about because it's like too far advanced for them.
Recorded a film score in Bombay. In 1971, he and Ravi organised what is now recognised as the first major charity concert. With a heavyweight lineup that included Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan and Ringo Starr. The concert for Bangladesh took place in New York's Madison Square Garden in front of 40,000 fans.
He often said that, you know, people need to be inspired and people also need a vehicle through which they can channel their, you know, their compassion and their generosity. And I think that was the most important thing he discovered.
Proceeds were supposed to aid refugees in the war in Bangladesh. However, tax issues and questionable expenses conspired to thwart his good intentions and gobble up the funds. By 1974, his first marriage to Patty was over. Things had started to go wrong early in their marriage, and Patty ended up hooking up with George's good friend Eric Clapton.
Oh yeah, I remember this. This is a story that I heard. She ends up marrying Eric Clapton, right? Where'd I get the insight from this from, bro? I don't know where it was, but
despite the betrayal, George and Eric remained close and jokingly referred to each other as husbands-in-law.
Ha ha ha. He took your girl.
He settled into some stability with his new wife, Olivia Arias, in 1978 and continued pumping out the solo albums and collaborating with other artists like Harry Nilsson and Billy Preston, as well as John and Ringo. He also set up his own film company, Handmade Films, which produced the Monty Python movies. But in 1980, he was shocked to the core by John's assassination. Never trusting the adulation of obsessive fans, George had long been afraid of the danger posed by stalkers. He often refused to promote his own albums and films, earning himself the nickname the Howard Hughes of rock. In his autobiography, I, Me, Mine, he wrote, "I don't want to be in the business full time because I'm a gardener. I plant flowers and watch them grow. I don't go out to clubs and parties. I stay at home and watch the river flow." In 1987, however, he dragged himself out to promote his new album, Cloud 9. The album spawned the hit single, Got My Mind Set on You, and he set off for a concert tour of Japan, supported by Eric Clapton. He also teamed up with Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison and Tom Petty to form the Travelling Wilburys.
Oh yeah.
In 1997, he reunited with his old friend Ravi Shankar to record a new album, Chants of India, based on ancient Indian mantras.
It was just a great excuse to be able to surround myself with these great musicians and the great words that are being said in this Sanskrit, because it was quite a blessing, really. And so it is a spiritual experience, but it's all down to the individual, you know, what you can manifest within yourself as to the value of anything. Really, the whole of life should be a spiritual experience because we are spirits who are just encased in bodies. People forget that and think they're just this body, but we're actually spirits in bodies.
Then suddenly, 2 years later, his old nightmares came back to haunt him when an intruder broke into his family home in Henley-on-Thames in England and stabbed him several times. Although George was left with a punctured lung, he and Olivia managed to restrain the attacker and detain him until the police arrived to arrest him. In court, 33...
That's too big of a crit, bro. See, like anybody, that's the thing, like your fears ended up manifesting. I feel like that's why I'm like thinking too heavy on things because you can bring to reality in certain things pertaining to fear specifically. But well, I'm going to say, man, this house is too big. Somebody could break in on this end, and you probably wouldn't even realize what was going on because you were on the other end of the house, and he could probably just camp out for a whole week and you wouldn't even notice he was in there. You know, all these big mansions, nah, you should be in a compact or more compact house to where you can hear everything going on. You know when something's missing, you know when something's awry. You just in on a loop. This type of crib, you're not gonna know what's going on. You be hiding in the closet, you could pop out at any time and then get stabbed at somebody.
3-year-old Michael Abram
Look at it.
He was possessed by George and had been on a mission from God to kill him.
This is a mansion.
In the end, Abram was acquitted on the grounds of insanity. Despite his bravery in the face of such danger, George was so traumatized by the event that he rarely ventured out in public again. Whether or not his injuries contributed to the re-emergence of the cancer that had first shown up in 1997 is a matter of speculation. A former heavy smoker, the disease was first diagnosed in his throat, and he ended up having growths removed from his throat and then his lungs.
It's going to have the potential to spread. One of the areas it can spread to is the lung, another is the brain. If it's a separate cancer in the lung, that too can spread on its own to the brain. But it's likely that they're related, and the more cancer you have, the more difficult it is to treat, I'm afraid.
But by 2001, the cancer had returned, spreading to his brain. Despite aggressive treatment, the tumour was found to be terminal, giving George just enough time to work on songs with his son Darnie that were released as the album Brainwashed after his death. He spent the final months with his family and died in Hollywood Hills on the 29th of November 2001 at the age of 58. His dying request was that his ashes be scattered in the river Ganges, and after his death, his family released this statement. He left this world as he lived in it, conscious of God, fearless of death, and at peace, surrounded by family and friends. Flowers and tributes from fans started pouring in.
I will just think of how he had such an effect on my life, and not how not how his life was ended, but more so how important his music was for our culture and for the world.
My heart and many other people's hearts starting in 1964, and I thank him for that.
And he wasn't about to be forgotten. First, there was the memorial concert in his honour on the first anniversary of his death, which raised money for his charity, the Material World Foundation.
His son looked just like him, like a spitting image of him.
Later, he was ranked 21 on Rolling Stone's list of the greatest guitarists of all time. And in 2004, he was inducted as a solo artist into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Then in 2005, George's widow, Olivia, staged a star-studded launch of the DVD of his 1971 concert for Bangladesh.
Because, musically it is a little bit of history, because it's one of those things you'll never get those guys together again. And so it's important.
And the legacy?
And the show was great.
The launch also included performances by his old collaborators Ringo Starr and Billy Preston, as well as his son Darnie, who also worked on the project. Finally, in April 2009, he was posthumously awarded his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Alongside Paul McCartney, celebrities queuing up to pay George their respects were Monty Python member Eric Idle and film star Tom Hanks.
Let us thank them all for making life worth living that much more. The record was an event. Every cut was an opera.
Hanks.
The entire story told ours. All things must pass, sure, but George is going to live forever. Thank you very much.
But the last word went to Olivia.
We all have deep feelings for George because he was such a deep feeling person. Once you met him, you couldn't help but be drawn into his world. And he wanted to be in your world too. And he was as funny as the day is long and just as perplexing. More and more, how deeply seated he is in our hearts and our lives. So,
I don't think of him singing Taxman, probably, or
how he will be remembered.
You know, I think of him singing Taxman, probably, or something. Or I just think of a great songwriter who, in a way, was in a group with two unbelievably fantastic songwriters as well, you know, and was able to still shine through, you know.
Often seen as the clown of the group, Richard Starkey, aka Ringo Starr, endured his fair share of ribbing from the rest of the band. Once asked if Ringo was the best drummer in the world, John Lennon famously replied, "He's not even the best drummer in the Beatles."
The disrespect.
In fact, Ringo was always the first to acknowledge his technical limitations, admitting, "Whenever I hear another drummer, I know I'm not good on the technical things. I'm your basic offbeat drummer with funny fills." The fact that he was a left-handed drummer playing on a right-handed kit didn't help matters. But despite those limitations, the band's producer, George Martin, was quoted as saying, "Even though he couldn't do a roll to save his life, he's got tremendous feel. He always helped us hit the right tempo for a song and gave it that support, that solid backbeat." He earned a reputation for being incredibly consistent and reliable, rarely making a mistake. And as pop music's first superstar drummer, he paved the way for later upfront beat merchants like Phil Collins, Dave Grohl, and Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. While he languished in the shadows of John, Paul and George on the songwriting front, it soon became clear that none of the others could match Ringo's dramatic abilities. After appearing alongside the rest of the band in their...
They say he was a clown. Come on, man. How y'all gonna do it like that? He was the clown of the group, for real? He just the goofy one. Got none of the girls, though. I'm sure he still got girls, though. Come on. He was in the Beatles, bro.
Movies Hard Day's Night and Help, he was lauded for his natural acting talent. After the release of Help in 1966, he talked of wanting to do more films and gave an insight into the frustrations he faced, waiting for other people to come up with new material for him to play.
I'm sort of out of it there because with John and Paul, they can still write even though we're sort of not working together. And George can, you know, learn his sitar and do things like that. I've just been sitting around. Getting bored? No, I'm getting fat.
When the Beatles finally parted ways in April 1970, there was no more sitting round for Ringo. He'd released 2 solo albums by the end of the year. First came Sentimental Journey, featuring his versions of a collection of rock standards. Then Beaucoup of Blues, a country-flavoured album that brought him 2 hit singles. The dependence on others that had led to so many wasted hours had taught him to deepen his pool of...
Bro, let me get this straight. He released a country album that got 2 hit singles, bro. Every single one of them, when they went solo, had some type of thing that went, some type of hit song. Is that the power of the Beatles, or that speak volumes to, I guess, their musical talent?
With collaborators, and throughout the 70s, he worked with a startling array of artists and musicians from all kinds of genres. As well as pulling in the arranging talents of Quincy Jones, Morris Gibb, and George Martin, he called on all his former bandmates to write songs for his solo albums. He returned favours by taking part in George's Concert for Bangladesh and playing on John's solo efforts. He also appeared in a few more movies, debuted as a film director, started a furniture company, and the record label Ringo Records.
Ringo Records.
In the middle of that came the divorce from his first wife, Maureen, with whom he'd had 3 sons, Zach, Jason, and Lee. In 1980, on the set of the slapstick comedy Caveman, he met and fell in love with former Bond girl Barbara Bach. After John's murder that December, they flew to New York together to comfort Yoko. They got married in April 1981 at London's Marylebone Registry Office. With John's shooting still fresh in everyone's mind, they tried to keep the wedding secret, but after word got out, around 30 security officers were employed to keep the surviving Beatles and their families safe in the ensuing crush. Over the next couple of years, Ringo continued collaborating with his former bandmates and released 2 more albums, Stop and Smell the Roses and Old Wave. Then in 1985, he became the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine in the popular animated TV series.
Are you kidding me?
By 1988, however, his famous partying lifestyle had got the better of him, and both he and Barbara checked themselves into a detox clinic in Tucson and underwent a 6-week program for alcoholism.
I think he was the booze abuser. Or was they all like that? Wasn't there a certain point in time in the Beatles' careers where like they were super heavily like drinking alcohol? Because I think they went through phases. Like obviously there was experiment where like they were smoking cannabis, they was taking LSD, you know, and then they was drinking heavily, right? Or correct?
Within 12 months, he bounced back to form the All-Star Band, the first in what was to become a revolving lineup of well-known musos included Nils Lofgren, Joe Walsh, Billy Preston, and Jim Keltner. Todd Rundgren, Howard Jones, John Entwistle, Peter Frampton, Richard Marx, Colin Hay, and Ringo's drummer son Zach have been some of the All-Star Band's most notable inclusions.
I feel blessed that, I get the opportunity to play with these youngsters. And, I feel blessed to play with all musicians, really, and I'm blessed that I'm still playing. So I think you, more than us, deal with the youngsters and the oldies, you know. I mean, I suppose I have to end up playing with, like, B.B. King to be the youngster.
Even though he's been getting out and about with the All-Stars for 2 decades, Ringo still gets asked about how they compare to the Beatles.
That was great, this is great. It was all new, a lot newer then. And, we're players, we're musicians. And, though the Beatles were those big icons and the haircuts and whatever else, underneath all of that were these 4 musicians.
Speaking of the haircuts, bro, I'll be wondering, like, what made the Beatles get that cut? Was that like, did their manager say, hey, who had told them to get the haircut and for all of them to look the same? If you know, put it in the comment section right now.
And that was the main deal.
Having said that, he and Paul have also been doing it together. Over the past few years, they have worked on a number of Beatles projects, including 2007's collaboration with Cirque du Soleil.
People tell me there ain't no use in trying.
To provide the soundtrack to the show Love, George Martin and his son Giles took the entire Beatles catalogue from tape and used these original recordings to create a sound bed that covered the whole Beatles' lifespan in a very condensed period.
The most exciting thing for me was the width and the breadth of the brief that they gave me. They said you can do anything you like. You can go through all the Beatle tapes and use any bit of it you like. They gave me carte blanche. And when I told Giles about this, I said, you've got to work with me on this. And he got excited about it too. And it was a responsible thing, of course, because you're gone too far.
The launch of the spectacular show was marked by a special dedication ceremony for John and George. 2 years later, they were representing their late bandmates again at the launch of The Beatles Rock Band, a video game that puts players on stage as members of the legendary group and allows them to play their material from a catalogue of 45 songs. 4 decades on from their famous final performance on the rooftop of Apple HQ in London, Paul and Ringo had lost none of their on-stage chemistry.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome. All right.
Looks like they want us to talk amongst ourselves, Paul.
Yeah, I think so.
What do you think of the game?
I love it.
You love it?
Yeah. I
Okay.
can't play it.
Thank you.
These feel funny guys, huh?
The graphics are very good.
Funny guys, huh?
And we were great.
Fantastic. Who would ever thought we'd end up as androids? But
I like the way I walk.
Show. We love it. It's wonderful. Thank you. Whoa.
Aside from touring with the All-Star Band and turning out for never-ending Beatles-related launches, Ringo also recently threw himself into an ambitious collaboration with ex-Eurythmic Dave Stewart. Their album, Liverpool 8, coincided with the start of a year of events in Ringo's hometown to highlight its growing cultural importance. He and Dave kicked off the city's year-long celebrations with a concert on the roof of St George's Hall in the city centre. The next night, Ringo was due to take centre stage again in Liverpool the Musical at the brand new Echo Arena.
So far, it's great. You know, it's a brand new arena. It's
Echo.
It's the best arena in Liverpool.
And Ringo's fellow Liverpudlians agreed he still had what it took to get the crowd going.
We've had a really good night. It's been absolutely brilliant. Ringo Starr was really good.
Fast approaching the big 7-0,
it's been brilliant.
Ringo was finding himself busy. So busy, in fact, that he decided to put an end to signing autographs. In a message posted on ringostarr.com in October 2008, he declared, "I'm warning you with peace and love. I have too much to do, so no more fan mail. Thank you, and no objects to be signed. Nothing. Anyway, peace and love. Peace and love."
He said, "I'm tired of it. Leave me alone."
And in the words of the Beatles' final album, let it be.
Dang. Shout out to Peter Kent and Gillian Bartlett, the narrator and the writer, man. That right there is the Beatles parting ways. Interesting. Honestly, to kind of understand what they was up to, what they was doing after the fact, man. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at FortWorthFabian. It's the road to 1 million subscribers, man. This one was long, about an hour. So, let me know if there's additional documentaries y'all want me to check out. And yeah, we'll catch you guys in the next video, man. We out of here.